In this video, we're going to take an initial look at HTML forms. And forms are something we use a lot when we're on websites. They are used to collect information. And so you might have filled out a contact information form on a website, and when you submit that, it's handled by a web server. So we're not going to handle that part of it, that's for a future video. But in these next few videos, we're going to talk about the actual input fields. That's what we're going to create with HTML. Now it all starts with the form element tag. You can see that right here. We have the opening tag, we have the closing tag. Now by itself, the form element tag doesn't do anything. It just declares in HTML that this is a form that we're going to submit. And you can see here though, we have a blank web page. Nothing in there because again, the form element tag by itself doesn't do anything. We have to put our input elements inside the form element. That's why I put this comment right here. Input elements go in here. So the first thing we're going to do in this video is create one of the most common input elements, and that is the one-line text box. And you've seen that many times when you filled out information on a website. So I'll just copy and paste the first line here. And so here we go. We actually have a text box right here. And that is used by the input element tag. So I've created that. Notice we don't need a closing tag because it's just an element that goes inside the parent form element. So that's the way it works. Now the key to this is to understand this attribute right here. Type equals text. This text denotes that this will be a one-line text box. That's what's going to be rendered when we refresh this page in a few minutes. Now I don't want you to worry about these three attributes: the action attribute, the method attribute, and the name attribute. We will talk about this in a future series, in a JavaScript and in a PHP series, because these have to do with the server side of this, and that's not what we're going to talk about in this HTML series. We are only interested in creating a text box in this series with HTML. We are not interested in server-side code at this point, so don't worry about those attributes right now. So let's go ahead and refresh our page now. And there you can see, we've got our one-line text box. Isn't that cool? And we can create another one. Let's go ahead and create a second one here. You can create as many as you want. And we'll hit save here. We'll refresh, and there you see we've got two. Now if you don't want these side by side, we can just put in a break tag, which we've seen before. And we'll hit refresh, and there you can see now they're in a top-down order. And you'll notice that when we click on the actual control, this is called a control, by the way, the actual one-line text box, though very few people call it a control, they usually just call it a one-line text box. But when we click on the control, it is highlighted in the browser. Now let's say you want to change the length of this box on your page. Let's say it's not wide enough to contain all the information that you want the user to enter. Well, it will automatically scroll to allow more letters, but what if you want this to be wider so people don't have to use a scroll bar? We can accomplish that by the size attribute. So let's go ahead and put that in right here, and we'll say size equals, and we'll say 100 characters. And we'll leave this bottom text box alone. So let's go ahead and refresh this, and let's see what we get. And you can see how much wider this is now. In fact, let's lower that to a more reasonable amount. How about 50 characters? And there you can see it's now much wider if you need a lot more information to gather here. So we're going to go ahead and just get rid of this. We'll keep the default, but I just wanted you to be aware of this attribute. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we're going to the form element tag, which is right here. And this, again, just acts as a container to put in whatever input fields we want. And the input field we made in the last video, of course, was this one-line text box, which is formed by the input element tag and also declaring the type as text. And that gives us, again, this one-line text box. But now we want to actually add some labels to these text boxes because people need to know what information they're entering. And so let's say we need a first name and a last name. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create our first label for this first text box, and we're going to ask for the first name. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste what I already typed out, and I'll explain it. So here's the label element. That's how we declare a label. And notice we have to close this one out, so we close that out with a closing label tag. The for, I'll explain this in a second. And here is where we put in our text, first name. And this is what will be displayed on the page. Now we have to tie this this label to this input element, and we do that with this for attribute. And you can give this any name you want. We called it first name. And then we have to create another attribute in our input element. And that is, again, ID. So we type in ID, and then equals, and then first name. And so again, this name right here has to match this for attributes. The for attribute has to match the ID attribute. And that's what ties these two together. So let's go ahead and refresh our web page. And there you can see, we've got our first name label right here. What's really neat about this too is when you use this label element and you click on the text, let's do that. When we click on the text, you can see the control is automatically highlighted if we click on the text. Now, if this was just normal text, it wouldn't highlight this one-line text box. So that's what's kind of cool about using this label element. And so let's just go ahead and copy and paste this code for our second box here. And we'll just rename this to second name. Or actually, you know what, more appropriately, we'll call it last name, because that's what it's going to be. And then let's take this ID here. And we'll just copy and paste this right here. And again, this ties our label to our input element. And we'll call this last name. And so let's go ahead and refresh everything up here. And, well, we forgot to actually make the text last name. So let's do that really quick. And we'll refresh this again. And there you see, we've got two text boxes now with labels in which we can collect information from our user. This will be submitted to a server where we will process that data. And again, if we click on the text, it highlights the text box. That's really kind of a nice attribute about this label element. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we'll actually do a multi-line text box. See you guys then.